Hey there, everybody. Thank you so very much for stopping by today to check out TLC Presents Todd-versations. Check out who I have sitting next to me today, the one, the only Dr. Jessica Shade with the Organic Center. Welcome.
Thanks, Todd. It's great to be here.
It is great to have you. I am such a fanboy of yours. You know that. I am a huge fan of the Organic Center for starters. I love the organization. I love what it's about. But you personally are one of my heroes out here today. I think so highly of you. You are so perfect at what you do for the Organic Center. And so I'm going to get my fanboy stuff out of the way. Otherwise, I'm going to lack focus all day. But I'm such a fan of you and what you've accomplished and what you've done and what the organization has done over the past, I don't know, 5, 7, 8, 10, whatever many years it's been. It's been amazing. And so I want people to know who you are. First of all, I called you doctor because you earned a doctor. You got a PhD from Berkeley, that's a JC, right? Or UC Berkeley, that's a JC. I don't even know. No, it's not JC? I don't know.
I don't want to knock JCs because I'm all about them. So
you're right. Okay. I'll take that as fair criticism. That's fair. I'll go with that. So PhD from Berkeley, you're an industry speaker, you're a TEDx chat speaker, you're all over the place talking about science and organics and what it means. You've got all kinds of honors, environmental accomplishments throughout your career. And in your spare time, you're a mom to 2 great kids, which is, I don't know how you juggle that, which, by the way, neither kid's named Todd, which we'll talk about after the podcast we get done. But nonetheless, I'm just throwing it out there because, you've heard me say that before. Yeah, you've heard me say it before.
But again, for both the girl and the boy, Todd and Toddette.
Yeah, that's fine. It doesn't matter. You can go with all kinds of different names with that. I'm totally cool with it. But, the one thing and again, go back on my soapbox for a second about the center. And one thing I love about the Organic Center is that it's so incredibly honest of an organization because you use science to guide you. It's not and I say this to people all the time, it's not a finger pointing. It's not a left. It's not a right. It's not an up. It's not a down. It's like literally, let's go do the work. Let's do the heavy lifting. Let's see what the results say. And then we'll have a conversation around it. And it's so refreshing to see an organization that's like that because there's not a lot of them out there that don't have some kind of an agenda behind them. And the agenda of the Organic Center is using science as a guidepost to light the way. And I just absolutely love that about the organization. So now I'm done fanboying. Okay, now I'm over. I'm chilling out. Now I'm going to go back to the role of trying to make this thing flow and not be too giddy about the whole thing. As I say sometimes, I'm jacked up like a spider monkey. I am totally jacked up like one today. There's no 2 ways about it. So I'd like to get into what the Organic Center actually is and talk a little bit about that. I want to talk a little bit about some of the science you guys are doing. And I want people to get to know you a little bit because, again, I just think you're such an incredible person. And I think it's really important to point out, I'm going to say it now, and I'm going to say it again. I'll probably say it 27 more times through this broadcast. The Organic Center is funded by the industry. It's funded by outside sources. It doesn't have, a big trust fund it's living under. It is literally funded by people like myself and others that give money to try to propel the conversation forward. And I think that's something we need to be mindful of. And hopefully at the end of this, people open up some checkbooks and get some Visa cards out and do some positive work to make a difference. So I'm going to shut up now. I'm going to turn it over to you because you're way more interesting and important than I am. So Dr. Shea, would you please share with us what is the Organic Center?
I would be happy to. And first, I'm going to say that Todd is being very modest right now because all the good things that he says about the Organic Center, he helped build. So he was part of the building of what the Organic Center is today. And when he says that we're based on scientific fact, that is our driving motivation. That is what we are trying to do, is sort through all of this, all of the information that is out there, that's on the internet, you're getting bombarded with on a daily basis. We're trying to distill that down into where are the credible sources of information coming from, and how do we communicate that in a clear, really concise way so that people have the information that they need to make informed decisions, so that parents like me can go to the grocery store and make a difference based on what they're buying, make sure what they're buying is the best for their kids, and have all of that information at their fingertips. And so one of the things that we really focus on is making sure that all of the information that we share comes from scientifically published sources. So that means These facts have been vetted by scientists, gone through a scientific review process, and then are published in scientific literature so that we can always cite to that literature. So everything that you see on our website has citation links to the original papers, to those original manuscripts,
Right.
where you can read everything. I mean, you can read about the actual methods of how it was done, what the numbers were that they found. Or if you don't feel like reading a 50-page paper that's written in extremely heavy jargon, you can read our summaries. But it's helpful because at least you know that whatever you're reading on our website actually has grounded scientific facts behind it.
Right.
And we also try and use that science and seed it into things that maybe non-scientists are interested in. So we have this fantastic repository of recipes. We help people with menu planning. So if you sign up for our newsletter, we will send you emails every Sunday when I'm doing my menu planning and just let you know what we're going to be cooking for the week, give you ideas.
Right.
And when you look at those recipes, there's a little bit of science in there. So we kind of sneak science in so that you know when you're going to the grocery store why you're buying the ingredients you're buying. And you know that when you are actually making those purchases, you're not just buying food for your family, which of course you are, but also you are making a difference in the world, in farm worker health, in biodiversity, in climate change mitigation.
Right. And I love that you talk about the diversity of science, right? Because I think people get afraid of the word science, right? They think because they don't understand it. It's like you hear the word science, like all of a sudden you're 15 levels into your master's degree. It's like mind blowing. And it's really, science is pretty simple, right? I mean, the subject matter is complicated, but the end result is so simple to understand. And that's why I want to get into some of these topics, as well, to kind of break some of these down, because I think people have a tendency, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's just my old gray hair himself, but people have a tendency to like, oh, science, I'm afraid of it. Or technology, oh, I'm afraid of it.
Yeah, you know, I think you're exactly right. And I know this from personal experience because I was not one of those people who grew up knowing they wanted to be a scientist. I grew up wanting to be an artist. And in fact, it wasn't until I was in my 20s where all of a sudden I started realizing, I'm actually good at this science. And I realized that science is all around us and it explains what we see in the world, that I actually started my scientific career. So I completely understand, sympathize with everyone who might hear scientific facts and just start shutting down. And that's one of the things that we really try and do with the Organic Center is communicate science in a way that doesn't get people's eyes glazing over.
Right. Yeah, I think that's one of the big things that I think is super important. And I don't is bringing science down a notch, not saying it's not, the end result's not important, but bringing down the conversation that's down a notch so people go, oh, there's that many, chemicals in that milk. Wait a minute. Right. It's pretty basic. One of the things that I think is super important. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, I don't even call it bringing it down a notch. I call it just straight translation, because it's written in basically a different language. And you can say the exact same things without dumbing it down for people, still having all of that information in a way that people can understand. And that's what we try and do.
I said this the other day. I was talking with Jenny Tucker about the same. It's like, when you get words with that many consonants in it, people just lose their shit. They have no idea. It's like, oh my God, there's 14 letters and 9 of them are consonants. How do I say that? Right. And I think that's where people get afraid.
Yeah,
it's so
just
simple
a translation problem. And I actually remember this happening to me. So I've always been able to talk about science in a way that was really engaging to people and that people could really connect with. And then I went to graduate school and I just got so immersed in a lot of the lexicon that you use when you're talking to other scientists day in and day out, that there was this transition where the people who I had been communicating with, who were not scientists, all of a sudden I could see them not being as interested in the facts or the research studies that I was trying to tell them about. And it was just about how I was talking about it. And that's kind of jarred me into really thinking about how we communicate science.
Well, it's science. Science has got us to where we are today, right? Technology as well, but science is a big part of that, right? Both good and bad science. And so I think it's really important that we lean back into understanding the value that it has, that getting smarter about your food, this planet, the climate, soil, your health, your family, all those things you want to throw at it is really an okay thing to do. We shouldn't be afraid of it. We need to embrace it, which is why I love this platform, which is why I'm so grateful that you're spending time with me today to chit chat a little bit about it, because I think people need to realize it's a safe subject and it's an important subject, because it does bring light to those things that maybe controversial to some people. Maybe some people don't want to embrace, they're afraid of it, whatever the case might be. But I think it's really important that we do embrace science and we do embrace the findings, good or bad, and understand them, because it's how we're going to change this planet. It's how we're going to make a difference, because we're not going to do it if we don't, right? We're not going to, we're not on a great trajectory as a planet today. And if we don't start embracing people like you and the Organic Center and what's happening in the world of science, 10 years from now, we're going to have a bigger problem.
Yeah. And one of the things that I like to emphasize, because I hear this a lot, that organic, since they don't use all of these technologies, is anti-science. We are not anti-science. In fact, organic is using the science that's out there to try and find ways to avoid a lot of the environmental issues that you mentioned, Todd.
For sure. So let's talk a little bit about how and who the center collaborates with, because you have a stable of people, and you don't have to list them all, but just, pick a few off the top of your head. You have a stable of universities and colleges that you're working with that are part of the team, a part of advising the team, part of the team that you work with to develop science. It's amazing. So could you just give us a few off the top? Because I think it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, sure. So we collaborate with institutions all over the United States and the world, to be frank. And one of the things that, like I said, we always try and focus on academic publications, so that we are not just submitting these papers for scientific review, but we are actually working hand in hand with researchers at academic institutions or governmental institutions. So we collaborate with researchers at the USDA. We collaborate, some of our academic partners are UC Berkeley, Purdue, Harvard, Texas A&M. Honestly, we have several dozen partners for all of our projects. But any project that we do, you can be sure that we're working with researchers at an academic or governmental institution.
That's how it works, right? I mean, that's the process. You do the work, you do the discovery, you write about it, you post it, you wait, you get it reviewed, right? Yeah. And then you get the blessings that your hard work was worth something, right? And that's the way science works. And I think it's great that you bring academics into the process, because there's so many smart minds all over this world. There's so many smart minds, especially in the school system itself. So I think it's great, and I'm appreciative of how much the center leans into the academic community.
Yeah, and it's also important to us to have unbiased partners. And about half of the people that we work with have never worked in organic before. So for example, some of our nitrogen work that we've done, there's nobody working in the nitrogen sector within organic. So what we did is we found the scientific publications that had the most impact, went to the researcher who had been working on the most cutting edge parts of nitrogen pollution, reached out to him, cold called him basically, and we're like, hey, do you want to collaborate on a project that has to do with organic agriculture? So a lot of our projects not just are working with academic institutions, but we're working with researchers who haven't worked with organic before.
That's awesome. And that's commendable. And I think it's great. And I've seen it firsthand, some of these projects, and firsthand some of the people involved, and got to, we've had the good fortune of going to some of these universities and seeing these projects firsthand, which is pretty impressive. Going to Harvard to talk about organics did not suck. I will tell you, that was a pretty cool experience. Right? It was a very, very cool experience to be a part of. So who does the center serve as an organization?
So we basically serve any stakeholder that's interested in information about organics. So we talk a lot to consumers, to people who are just trying to feed their families and understand the best way to do that. We also talk a lot to policymakers. So we bring this science to Congress, and we've done congressional briefings. We've met with Congress members in their office. We've even had meetings with the White House about pollinator health. We also work very closely, as I mentioned, with researchers and with communicators, nonprofits. A lot of our research has to do with helping organic farmers overcome challenges on their field. So we work a lot with organic farmers as well as the industry. So a lot of times we'll talk with industry partners about what challenges they're seeing or what interests their consumers have, and then build projects around those issues.
Right. So drilling down a little bit into your day-to-day, right? Because as the director of science programs, what is, your responsibility for the center?
I like to say that I'm kind of a glorified project manager because we have so many projects going at any one time.
Right.
So we have between a dozen and 24 projects at any given time. So one of the things that I do is I help assemble the teams. And when I say teams, it's not just a bunch of researchers getting together. We have these very multifaceted teams. So we have researchers coming together with policymakers, coming together with organic stakeholders and industry members. And then I help knit all of those different perspectives, and not just different perspectives, sometimes completely opposing perspectives, into a common goal, so that we can develop a cohesive research strategy and communication campaign around it. So I'm kind of
you're the official cat herder.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what it is. You're the cat herder. That's what it is.
I joke that my degree should have been in sociology rather than biology, because so much of what I do is really working with people. And
for sure,
because if you don't have all of these different teams working together seamlessly, then the results that you come up with aren't going to be useful for people.
Correct.
And they're not going to result in changes that you
correct.
want.
Right. Well, it's so important. And being a good leader is a tough job, right? I always say this all the time. It's really easy to manage a job description. It's really hard to manage the people in the job description, right? And so I can imagine when you're dealing with all these people from around the globe and all these different projects and all these different personalities, it's a balancing act. And I bet the kids have helped you balance a little bit, right? You found a little more perspective now because you got two young ones.
I cannot tell you how often teaching and engaging with children has actually helped me in my professional career. Even when I was in graduate school, I did a fellowship where we taught fourth graders, and I went back to teaching undergrads and used the exact same tools that I needed to keep the fourth graders interested, and it worked so much better.
I love it. So it's kind of I don't want to say it's a rigged question, but it's kind of a tough question maybe to answer. But why is the center important? I think that's a good question, actually, but I think it's a tough question sometimes to answer.
Yeah, one of our biggest impacts that I think we have is providing people information. And I know I already talked about this, how we're constantly surrounded, constantly inundated with information, that it's hard to know where to go for actual facts, because there's so much opinion out there and there's so many emotions. And I'm not trying to discount opinions, emotions. You have to do what's right for you. You have to feel what you want to do. But if you want those hard facts, that's where the Organic Center steps in. And you actually see that in a lot of the impacts that we have. So we are one of the top organizations that the media goes to for information about organic. We've had articles and been quoted in the New York Times, in USA Today. We've been asked to talk at the United Nations headquarters. So we really, that integrity and that scientific basis has really led to a lot of successes when it comes to people trusting us.
Right, for sure. And I think that's the biggest thing, right? When you think about science really is about trust, right? I think there's a lot of it, right? And I think bad science gives, untrusting science, science that is, that is around for the wrong reasons, right? Or motivated for the wrong reasons or created for the wrong reasons is a problem. And I think that that's one of the problems that people have with science. I think it's where that kind of standoffish sometimes comes from folks, perhaps. And I love the fact that the integrity of the Organic Center is so incredibly high, and the staff that just the way they function is it's just awesome to see. So the Organic Trade Association is involved in the center, which is something that came a few years back, kind of blending that all together. And I want to just have you share with everybody, what is OTA's role with the center?
So the Organic Trade Association is kind of the administrative auspices that we work under. So they do all of the things that I consider boring. So like bookkeeping, a lot of the managerial type things when it comes to tracking, reporting. And that means that we get to do the fun things, which is science. They also help us a lot with communication. So they bring the science to the media, help us pitch our research to the right people. They help connect us with the policymakers that we bring science to. And in return, we bring the science to them. So everything that they're doing gets plugged into what research is actually happening right now on the ground. So it's kind of neat because a lot of their initiatives also have scientific as a basis for them because we work so closely together.
And I think it's great that, they're obviously making a difference. And part of the process of this decision was about you guys being able to focus on the science, right? But the great reason why people should be members of the OTA, right? It's another reason why membership needs to happen. If you're in this space, you need to step up and join, and you need to step up to support the Organic Center. That was the first pitch I made. Well, second, technically, that's two. And I don't know how many more there's going to be, but there's going to be more than two, trust me. But I think it's so important.
OTA members work a lot with us. So we work directly with their working groups. So for example, there are several working groups that have projects devoted to their agendas because those research priorities came out of the Organic Trade Association, and then we got brought in as the science sister organization. And, the members of the OTA say, all right, here's the research that really needs to happen. Can you make this happen? And then we take those priorities to researchers, we take it to government agencies, we help broaden the network so that we can get research done and achieve the goals that are set by these Organic Trade Association members.
Right on. Let's get into some research. Let's talk a little bit about some science, right? So first off, let's just put you on the spot a little bit. Tell me some organic myths that are out there today.
Yeah, so there are a lot of myths about organic, and actually I find it really fun to talk about the myths because that's where the cutting edge science is. So there's a lot of science out there about the benefits of organic that everyone already knows. Everybody already knows that organic farming helps biodiversity, but there is a myth out there that when organic is helping biodiversity, it's actually just helping pest populations. And so there's very cool research that gets done that actually breaks that down. They say, okay, there's a ton of research looking at biodiversity on organic farms. All that research agrees there's higher biodiversity on organic farms. But what kind of biodiversity? Is it really these insects that are eating crops, or is it other things? And so there's this very cool study that actually looked at it and found that the majority of that increase in biodiversity is from beneficial insects. It's from pollinators. It's from insects that will eat those herbivorous pests. So things like ladybugs and spiders. And so it really showed that this myth that you hear, I hear it from conventional farmers who get angry at their organic neighbors and say, oh, my pests are coming from you because you aren't spraying them. So the pests are just harboring in your farm and exploding. And the research actually shows that that is not the case. And in fact, there have been studies that show that conventional farms that have organic neighbors end up having higher levels of these beneficial insects. So they have higher levels of pollinators. So it's especially cool because it's trying to dispel some of these polarizing ideas between organic and conventional neighbors and say, actually, we should be getting along, especially because your organic neighbors are probably helping you when it comes to things like pollinators.
How about another one? You got another one you can pull out?
Oh yeah,
back.
I have
Go
so
on.
many.
Throw me
So
one more.
another one is on tillage. So there's this whole myth about how organic isn't as regenerative as conventional or agriculture because organic farmers use tillage as a way to control weeds. And first of all, if you actually look at the statistics of conservation tillage, according to the USDA National Agriculture Statistics Service, organic and conventional actually use conservation tillage practices at about the same amount of time. So about 40% of the time. So that common refrain that you hear that all organic farmers till and most conventional don't is actually a fallacy. And the coolest research that has come out of that myth actually plays to the critics. So there's been some really cool research that looks at what happens when you compare soil organic carbon in organic full till to conventional no till. And organic still ends up sequestering more carbon. And that study that I mentioned that does this, that kind of plays to the critics, is out of the USDA. So it's out of the USDA's Agricultural Research Service. And they did this long-term comparison of organic to conventional cropping systems. And they compared soil organic carbon between organic plots that use full tillage and conventional no-till plots. And what was different about their study, so usually studies that compare soil organic carbon sample at very shallow levels of the soil, but this study was a little bit different because it looked at carbon in the soil at intervals all the way down to a depth of a meter. Mm-hmm. And what they found was that in the first 4 to 5 centimeters of soil in the conventional no-till plots, there was higher levels of soil organic carbon than the organic full till plots. But after about 6 centimeters, that trend completely reversed. And the organic plots had more carbon all the way down to about 40 centimeters, after which there's kind of the same level of carbon between organic full till and conventional no till. And when they summed up the total soil organic carbon in each system over the full depth, all the way down to a meter, they found that soil organic carbon is still significantly greater in organic plots than conventional, even when you compare full tillage and organic to no-till and conventional. And that's because carbon in a no-till system mostly accumulates on the surface where those plant residues are deposited. But in an organic tillage system, those residues are worked down and buried into the soil. So there's greater soil carbon at deeper depths where it's more resilient to degradation. And, you know, my point here isn't to suggest that we shouldn't be promoting increasing reduced tillage in organic systems for soil conservation. It's really just to say that the suite of soil fertility management practices used by organic farmers in combination with tillage still leads to greater increases in soil organic carbon than no-till conventional.
Can you, can you just explain to everybody, just to kind of back up a touch on what you just talked about, what is soil carbon sequestration, right? What is it? What does it mean? Because I think there's probably a lot of people going, oh, that's fantastic, but I don't know if I understand 100% what that means.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you asked for that communication, because carbon is a greenhouse gas that's one of the major contributors to climate change in the form of carbon dioxide. But what's interesting about carbon is that with the right techniques, it can be locked away in the soil to help reverse the trajectory of climate change. And right now, about 80% of the world's terrestrial carbon is stored in soils. And with the exception of oceans, soils are the Earth's largest carbon sink. And like I said, with proper management, we can increase carbon sequestration. And what that is that's locking carbon away in the soils, which helps climate change mitigation. But
Right.
if we don't manage soils well, we end up depleting those carbon stores, releasing that carbon into the atmosphere and contributing to climate change. And that's kind of a worst case scenario, but that's exactly what's happening right now from conventional agriculture. And there was actually a recent study that looked at carbon over the last 1,200 years and found that 133 billion metric tons of carbon have been lost worldwide in the top 2 meters of soil alone.
Wow.
So, 133 billion metric tons. It's this incomprehensible amount of carbon that used to be in our soils that is now in our atmosphere contributing to climate change.
Right. Yeah, it's like floating plastic.
Yeah. And I know things get really depressing when I start citing.
I know, but it's a fact. It's a fact. It's a byproduct of choice.
Yeah. And there's also good news. There's this growing body of research that points to organic farming techniques as a way to build soil carbon while at the same time reducing greenhouse gas emissions and improving energy efficiency. So there, it's these very depressing facts, but there's also good news, which is really all you have to do is choose organic and you're helping fight climate change on multiple different fronts.
But look, these are hard topics, right? These are things that there's one side of this conversation that doesn't want to hear a damn thing you have to say, right? There's one side that says you're full of BS and blah, 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 blah. And it's always going to spin that way. There's another side saying, I'm going to drink this up because I want to make a conscientious difference. I mean, to me, it's really cut and dry. So I agree with you. It gets to be a challenging subject for people. And I want to go back in a second. I want to talk a little bit more about soil health a little bit. I want to get a little bit deeper. I'd like to talk about a couple of projects that you got, or let you just share a little bit more in depth about some of the things you're working on, because I think it's a very, very important topic. But before we do that, if you would indulge me 1 second, I want people to understand what the Organic Center is actually doing, right? When you talk about a dozen projects here and 2 dozen, all this other stuff, I don't think people realize I have a laundry list of stuff here that's actively going on in the center right now. And I'm going to babble through these really quick because I think it's going to put a little bit of perspective on what you've already shared, what I'd like to get into a little bit deeper after this, as far as what's going on in soil health, what's going on in chemicals and other things I want to get into and talk about. But I think that perspective in science is important, right? And I think having a perspective of what the Organic Center is actually doing and has done is hopefully going to lead people to open up their checkbooks. Pitch number 3, come on now, help us out. Let's make this organization thrive. All right, here we go. So here's just some of the projects. I'm just throwing them out. How does organic dairy reduce chemical use? You've created a calculator in avoiding ag chemicals in dairy. You've got a partnership going right now with the Foundation for Food and Agriculture, where you're framing up a runway for prioritizing research projects to address the top needs for the organic community. Protecting farmers from pests. It's hard for me to say. Protecting farmers from pesticides. That's a tough one. The lips, the teeth, the tip of the tongue. Wow. Evaluating the food safety impacts of cover crops, grazing and fresh produce systems to improve cover crop adaptation, crop livestock integration, and soil health. The effects of organic farming practices on nitrogen pollution. The benefits of organic meat, organic cotton, one of the most important choices you can make for the environment. Improving yields through soil health practices in organic farms. Net positive impacts on climate change. You guys have partnered with Harvard and the Sustainability and Health Initiative to look at the net positive effects of climate change in organic farming. On-farm biodiversity, which is an interesting project, which hopefully you'll touch on a little bit when we get back into the soil subject. Organic food and farming as a tool to combat antibiotic resistance and protect public health. Boosting carbon sequestration on organic farms. Organic solutions for citrus greening. Reducing occupational pesticide exposures for farmers and farm workers. Sequestering carbons in soil, which is a project you did with Northeastern University to explore the impacts of carbon in the soil. Fire blight on organic apples and pears. I don't even know if people recognize the depth that you guys fought to try to save organic apples and pears years ago. Organic alternatives to conventional celery powder as a meat curing agent. Now that's a dinner topic. Decreasing, this one's really starting to take off, which is, you guys were way ahead of this curve, is decreasing arsenic uptake in organic rice systems. which you guys work with the USDA and the Agricultural Research Service to conduct research affecting the presence of arsenic in organically grown rice. Protection-related contaminants in retail milk, which I want to get into in more detail. I'm not going to say much now, but basically your test was pulling milk off of the retail shelves and getting into it and figuring out what was in there. And there was some serious, I mean, there's some illegal antibiotics, there's high levels of growth hormones, pesticide contaminants. There's some crap in here that's probably worth people recognizing. It's a conversation. Another one, sustainable and profitable strategies for IPM in Southern organic rice. Multi-regional risk analysis on manure, which is an interesting topic. But the one that I think that I saved kind of the one best for last, and I'm going to lean out of the way of the screen, is you guys were gamers when it came to supporting organics and pollinator health. Because apparently bees are a big deal. And I guess we need them. I don't know. I didn't read that anywhere, but I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, I like to say that everything that's delicious that we eat, anything that you say you love that is a fruit, probably needs pollinators.
Yeah, but I thank you for indulging me a minute, and everybody listening. I hope I didn't bore you too much with all the babbling, but I think it's so important that we recognize that the work is huge, and it's a big, big umbrella that you guys work on. And there's a boatload of topics that are worthy. That whether you're an organic believer or not, the end of the day, we have got to make better decisions about our planet. We've got to make better decisions about all these people that are coming on the spaceships that are heading our way, all these things that are going for our health, for our longevity, for all of it. And it all starts with smart science. It all starts with taking a hard look at tough subjects and having an honest conversation about it.
That's absolutely right. And I would even go so far as to say that the research that we do, while we have the organic farmer, the organic industry, the organic consumer in mind, is not isolated to organic. So everything that we're doing can be implemented and has been implemented by conventional agriculture as well. And what we're seeing, a trend that we're seeing, is this change where it used to be the only people who would work with us were organic farmers, organic researchers, organic companies. Now we're starting to get approached by conventional researchers, conventional farmers, et cetera, because they're running into issues, especially environmental issues, but also on-farm challenges, such as herbicide-resistant weeds, that they realize these silver bullets that are the go-to for a lot of conventional systems don't actually have a long-term efficacy. So they, the longer you use them, the less effective they are. Or they're starting to see their soils getting degraded to the point where it's difficult to grow crops. And so a lot of the research that gets done on organic systems, this holistic view of how we manage farm ecosystems, is starting to get adopted by conventional growers. So I have this very optimistic view of the future where, rather than organic versus conventional, we see a lot more of organic and conventional working together, learning from each other, and advancing the sustainability of agronomic systems.
All right. So I want to I want to go a little bit deeper on a couple subjects, because I think it's important that people not only hear what you've done in a little bit more detail, but I think that, to me, it's one of the most important things I think you guys have ever done at the center. And I want to start first off with chemicals in dairy. And if I can, I got some stats here that I pulled that I think is just fascinating, and I'm not going to get all of them out, but I just want people to recognize that the amount of chemicals that you can avoid drinking milk in the United States, it's organic right now, is each year is about 593 million gallons are produced organically. And that equates to about 164.5 million pounds of fertilizers that are avoided each year. Now, the counter flip to that, this is what freaks me out. If all the milk in the United States were organic, right? So that would be all 26 billion gallons, right? It would be 7.2 billion pounds of fertilizer.
Yeah.
It's staggering. It's absolutely staggering to me when you think about how simple that math is.
Yeah. And the fertilizer has a really big impact on climate change, on soil health. But in addition to that, You can also think about the pesticides that get used, the
Right.
antibiotics that get used. And we actually, in addition to this calculator, and I encourage everyone, go to our website, check out this calculator. It's pretty amazing.
It's freaking cool.
It's really fascinating to see how many chemicals are used as a whole. And it's really encouraging because every time I buy a gallon of milk, it's easy to think, I'm only buying 1 gallon of milk. What impact am I really having? And all these tiny drops add up to huge impact. So go check that out. But in addition to that, we did a study where we actually looked at what chemicals are in conventional milk and what chemicals are in retail organic milk. So we went out, and I say we, by we, I mean the Organic Center, but
Your people.
also our.
You're the head dog. You have people. Just say my people.
This one was led by researchers out of Emory University. So they have this whole research team that went out, collected samples of milk from around the United States, organic and conventional, sent it to a lab, and they did this blind study. So the people at the lab did not know which ones were organic, did not know which ones were conventional. They analyzed it. The results are absolutely shocking. So what we found, first of all, the good news is that there were no residues of antibiotics, currently used pesticides, et cetera, in organic milk. So I'll give you the good news up front. But there were some extremely concerning results from conventional milk. Over 60% of the samples of conventional milk had pesticides in them. And when it comes to antibiotics, we found that 37% of the samples had residues of illegal antibiotics in the conventional samples. So it's not just that there are antibiotic residues, it's that there are residues that are in conventional milk that aren't even supposed to be used in dairy production. So it's some pretty shocking findings.
Scary.
Yeah, and the pesticides that we found are extremely controversial ones. I don't know if you guys have heard of like chlorpyrifos.
Just talking about that this morning.
Yeah.
No. What is it?
Well, it's it's a pesticide that's so toxic that the EPA recommended it be banned from use entirely in the United States. And then it took several years for that to happen. But just recently, there was this big success where it's no longer used for production in the United States. So all that to say that these studies that we're doing, not only are they out there to scare you, they are also having real world impact. So shortly after we had this study come out, it was one of the pieces of the puzzle that eventually helped lead to this pesticide getting withdrawn from use on crops in the United States.
And if I can, and I don't think that either one of us are taking the position to try to scare people. I think,
Yeah.
and I don't mean, right. And I don't want to, because I think that's where the bad raps in science gets, right? Well, we used our big muscle to scare everybody into a corner. That's not the thing. It's just facts. It's just black and white. It is what it is. This is the stuff we tested. Here's what we found.
Yeah.
Right. And in all fairness, but if you would have tested it and you wouldn't have found it, you would have said we didn't find anything. That's how science works.
That's true. And actually, as a parent, I always look for kind of the comforting science. And there is a lot of science out there that shows that, it's very difficult to eat an all organic diet. It's
for sure
even more difficult to feed your picky kids who only want to eat bread and pasta and whatever else, chicken fingers, all organic diets. And so one of the groups of studies that I always emphasize to other parents is there's plenty of research showing that even if you eat just some organic, you have a big impact on the pesticide load on your bodies, on the bodies of your children. So there's studies showing that people who eat organic occasionally, just whenever you can find it, the pesticide loads in their bodies are significantly lower than if you never eat organic. So Don't stress, do what you can, and know that you're making a difference.
Well, you're right. And you are making a difference. And the same token, why not have all the things that you need in your mind to make a good choice?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, look, we look both ways when we cross the street because we want to make a good choice, right? It's no different than with your food. And I think we've got into this mindset of it's not that big of a deal, right? It's all in this country, it's just always there, right? You go to the grocery store, it's always there. It's like, we had such a meltdown when there was no toilet paper a year ago. And it wasn't, in some ways, it wasn't because, yes, toilet paper was a mess, but one of the things that I don't people realize is that it's such a big cube in the grocery store. You take 10, 24 packs of toilet paper off the shelf, that's a big shelf. That's part of the reason why it's not there too, right? We get so freaked out. And I think it's really important that we need to make choices based off of facts and based off of science. I think it's how we move the ball down the field. It's certainly how we're going to increase the level of conversation in this country.
Yeah, and that's such a good point. And one of the things that I also find as a parent is that I care about all these issues. I stress about all these issues like climate change, soil health, etc. But I don't necessarily have time to, go out and lead a campaign against climate change or do all of these kind of complex, like, where do I even start? Which is kind of nice when it comes to organic, because it means that when I go to the grocery store, if I have these facts, I know what I can choose to actually make a difference in all of these things that I care about. So I feel like when I'm at the grocery store, I can kind of multitask. I'm all about multitasking as a working mom, where I am feeding my family and also supporting causes that I want to with my dollar and with
exactly
my meeting.
And make a choice to vote with your dollars, 100%. I mean, that's a beautiful thing about a capitalistic society. You can vote with your dollars. Your money can go wherever you want to take it, right? And I think that's super important, which is why you should donate to the Organic Center. That's plug number 4. Let's switch gears off of. Do you have? Well, before I say that, is there anything else you wanted to bring up on dairy that we didn't touch? Did you want to get anything else? If not, I'm going to switch, and I've got another one I'm going to throw at you.
Well, if people want to really dig into dairy, go to our website. We have a few reports that look at the suite of benefits when it comes to organic dairy. So not just looking at the pesticides, not just looking at fertilizer, but actually when you produce dairy organically, you have differences in nutrition. So you have these better nutritional profiles. It's this whole suite of benefits. So I'm not going to get too far into it, but go to our website, check it out. It's amazing.
Right. And you can donate on the website. That's plug 5. So I want to go back a little bit to soil health and carbon again. And can you just really, and I want to touch on the research that you're doing. If you could just, throw it. I mean, I know that there's one study that, you guys reached out to over 8,000 farmers across 48 states. You got all these samples and you worked all that. I mean, that's a great project. I mean, feel free to run with whatever you want, but I'd just like to talk specifically about some of the work that you've done on that subject.
Yeah, and that project is really interesting because one of the comments that I always get when I talk about organic practices being good for soil health, being good for carbon sequestration is, how do you know that organic is better? Especially because there are so many farmers and different farmers are doing different things. And there are some conventional farmers that are actually using really sustainable practices. So how do you compare all of these different strategies that farmers are using to make generalizations about organic being better? And so that was one of the principles of this study that we were looking at. We surveyed, over 1,000 soil samples from around the United States, including all these different practices. So we included different farmers using different strategies on different crops in different soil types. We had all this noise. And what we found was that even when you take all of those differences, even when you take all that noise into account, organic sequesters significantly more carbon in the soil. So it's pretty amazing and, pretty poignant when you see studies like that, where you take everything into account and still, despite all of those background factors, organic is sequestering more carbon in the soil. And that gets at a lot of the, we were talking about myths earlier. That study was really to look at, okay, but let's look at this. Let's take this big bird's eye view and really understand what impacts organic is having. And so that study showed that organic does have substantial impacts regardless of everything else that's going on within organic farms. And now we're building on that. So we've done a few other projects that were funded through different industry members, as well as Grow Organic. So a voluntary checkoff like program in organic that's funding research in climate change mitigation. And so what we did is we looked within organic. So we said, okay, organic has all these benefits when it comes to carbon sequestration, when it comes to soil health. Let's look within organic and actually understand what is causing those benefits. Why is organic so much better? And how do we build those so that we can improve organic even further beyond this baseline benefit? And so we published a project with researchers out of the University of Maryland that does this deep dive into soil health and actually pinpoints the strategies that organic farmers are using to build soil health and improve soil health. And we did the same thing with carbon sequestration specifically, actually quantifying carbon sequestration and understanding what strategies can farmers take that have the biggest impact on carbon sequestration, and how long is it going to take to see those benefits arise. So some of the kind of most interesting things to come out of that are that best practices when it comes to soil amendments, so using things like compost rather than synthetic fertilizer, those can have the biggest impacts when it comes to sequestering carbon. Similarly, tillage, if you can reduce tillage, it doesn't have as big of an impact as using best practices in soil amendments, but it still has a pretty big impact. So, you know, we kind of lay out all these different strategies that are used by organic farmers, which ones have the biggest impact. And hopefully these, like I said, don't just get adopted by organic farmers. They're also borrowed into conventional frameworks for full sustainability across the board.
Amazing. And it's when you look at the data, when you go, and again, go on the website, check it out. When you look at what the depth of what you've done and what you're talking about, it's not hard to look at saying, hey, this is making a difference. It's not hard to look at, back to voting with your dollars, that it is making a positive change. And I think that, and I said it earlier, I'm going to say it again. I think sometimes we get so set on right now. Like, if, you know, if I can't see something right now, it doesn't mean anything to me, as opposed to doing something today makes a difference tomorrow. And it may not be, maybe it's next week, maybe it's 2 weeks from now, but nonetheless, we're in that point with this science and with this data and what you guys are doing, that this is really, really a valid point, I think, to make, is that what you choose to do with your dollar today drastically will affect what happens tomorrow. And we're just not going to be able to see it right away, but we have to buy into the logic of it.
Yeah. And, you know, I love that you're talking about thinking long-term, because that kind of brings up another myth that I hear about organic, which is that organic can't feed the world. And my response to that is always, okay, let's think about this long-term, because if we use conventional practices that are degrading our environment, we aren't in 50, 100, 500 years, we aren't going to have any pollinators to pollinate our crops. We aren't going to have soil health that we need to have high yields. There are all these things that organic is sustaining right now that are going to be, you know, we take them for granted as we're growing crops now, but 50 years down the road, we're going to be stressing about whether we can grow food at all. So using organic practices for that long-term food security is really important. It's maybe the most important thing when it comes to feeding the world over the long term.
I don't disagree. I think it's a big part of the overall conversation about how we're going to get down the field, how we're going to do this, what it's going to be like for your two kids, right? Where's the water going to come from? You know, where's all these different things are going to happen that we need to invest in today with our choices. They're going to make for a better tomorrow. And I think that we can do this very easily with our food choices. We can, again, vote with our dollars. It's not hard. It's really not. It's really, really not. And to be able to have somebody like the center lay out a runway of information and knowledge to reinforce good decisions. It's not hard math, kids. It's just not hard math. I went to public high school. I know this isn't hard math when you look at it, right? So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for the other myth, by the way. You probably have about 50 more I could tweak out, but When you come back on, we'll do it again. I do want to touch on something that is, I know, super, super important to you. This was your brainchild. This is something that I know that has turned into be something really quite amazing. Tell us a little bit about the Organic Confluences conference that you set up.
Yes. So the idea behind the Organic Confluences conference is it is a conference where we can talk about issues where you need different stakeholder groups at the table. So you need farmers, you need industry members, you need policymakers, you need researchers all together to move a particular issue forward. So we've had confluences that focus on climate change. We've had confluences that focus on extension, so information transfer to farmers. We've had confluences on how do you make research count. So how do you make sure you're doing the research that needs to get done and communicating it to the audiences that need to hear it to make differences. And our next conference is actually a series of conferences, and it's about agricultural technologies. So we're going to be looking at things like what technology is out there that can help organic, especially because organic growers don't have access to some of the tools that conventional do. So things like pesticides, synthetic fertilizers, organic farmers just can't use those. So there are some new technologies coming out that could disproportionately help move organic forward. However, a lot of those technologies are only accessible to large scale, high income, privileged farmers. So we need to think about technology in this way where it's not going to further exacerbate the disparities between marginalized communities, BIPOC farmers, and the larger scale, predominantly white farmers. So we're going to look at all of these things. So what technology is out there, what technology is needed, and how do we think about technology in a way where it's not just further embroiled in and adding to this structural racism that a lot of our agriculture has been built on. And then we are going to follow that up with an open source hackathon. So we're working with GOAT, the gathering of open.
Tom Brady? You're working with Tom Brady? No, sorry.
I wish, but it's an even cooler organization, Gathering for Open Agricultural Technology, to do this, to actually work on software, on prototypes that are farmer-led, open source, so everyone has access to them while thinking about issues of equity and inclusion.
Right.
So it's going to be really fun. I will give the dates. We just decided on the dates. December 2nd is the first one. And then our next, after that, we're going to do February 10th. So those are the two virtual conferences. They are free. Go to our website. You can start finding out about them. We don't have registration open yet, but we will soon. And then the hackathon is going to be in late February of 2022.
That's awesome. Well, technology is so important, I believe, in agriculture. And I think one of the problems with technology is that we get stuck, and I say this a lot, is that I think sometimes we look at technology as an and or as opposed to an and. And, we need to incorporate technology in order. It's the only way we're going to move this thing forward. It's no different than science. Science is technology too, right? It's just all a part of it. So I think it's important. And I appreciate you guys taking a look at that and looking at these alternatives that are going to make a difference, because we have to. Right? We have to look at stuff like that. So you mentioned the conference, you mentioned the dates, and I'm going to give it. So we're going to go with plug 6 real quick. I'm going to give you the chance to get your first plug in. I've got 5. I'm up 5-1. So I'm going to give you one here. Tell people how they can help, how they can join, and how they can support the center.
So you can go onto the Organic Center, you can donate directly, you can help sponsor any of the events that we do. So the conference always has sponsorship. We also have this really fun benefit every year. So in the past, we've done it in person. We've had this delicious organic dinner. This year, of course, thanks COVID, we did not do that, but it actually kind of forced us to do something even cooler, which included all of these organic tutorial videos, Twitter parties, a lot of direct engagement with consumers,
right,
which gave us an even bigger impact. So you can engage with our benefit. Another thing you can do is just sign up for our newsletter. It's as simple as that. Just start learning about these issues, start getting engaged. And of course, if you are interested in a particular research topic, reach out to me directly. I love talking about this stuff. So I am always happy to talk with people.
Well, I think it's important people realize when you said the word consumers a couple of times today, and I wanted to go back to it. I'm glad my feeble mind grabbed it real quick. You got a lot of information that retailers, wholesalers, whomever it is in the planet, consumer can go to that they can use to drive consumer messaging, to drive a different conversation. And I think that that's a great resource that's available to them.
Yeah, and we actually get a lot of requests directly from retailers and companies that deal with consumers directly because they get so many questions and they're like, I don't know. And we can give that information. So if you need scientific information about a particular topic, we're here for you.
Cool. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and I want people to get to know you a little bit because I just think you're such a cool person. So I always try to go through and as we talk about these and, I kind of beg you to come on and find time to do this, but I didn't have to beg too hard, which is cool. Light begging wasn't heavy begging. I appreciate that. But, to me, you, like I said, I'm a fanboy. You inspire me. I just love being around you in the whole 9 yards. But, people that inspire other people somewhere have to go to the well to drink a little inspiration themselves. So who in your life's inspired you?
Oh, yeah, I have a lot of inspiration. So my parents are huge inspirations for me. My mom built a company out of nothing, and watching her succeed as a woman in business in a time, especially she works in finance in a time where women just were not owning their own companies very often in finance. Huge inspiration. My aunts in Argentina who have PhDs in sciences, which again, these are not just my aunts, they're my great aunts. So they're in their 90s.
Wow.
And have, they were getting PhDs in science when there were no women doing that. So some of my inspirations, and my children are also big inspirations for me.
You'll get over that. Trust me. You're going to get over that.
I sometimes I already am, but just seeing the world from their eyes is really, really gives me a lot of energy to keep doing the things that I do. And I'll share one quick story.
Go.
About my son, where he was, we were talking, he's 3.5. So we're talking about the different months of the year, and I'm teaching him the months, and we get to August, and he looks at me and he says, August, I know August. August means fires. I'm in California, so August does mean fires here.
Fires in California, yeah.
Where we have to stay indoors. And that's if you're lucky, if you're not getting evacuated from where you live. And so just thinking about the perspective that they have on things like climate change at such a level where they're like, this is what it means to me as a child, where when I think about my childhood, there were no months full of smoke in August.
No.
So just getting that novel perspective kind of has shifted how I do things and why I do things.
You know what? A conversation through the eyes of a child is the best conversation you'll ever have. There's nobody ever there. I don't think you can get any more honest than what comes out of it. What a child drinks up and then gurges back out at you. I think it's great. They kill me. They kill me. But I'm glad mine are gone. Get out of here. Tell me, career or otherwise, what you're most proud of.
I think one of the things that I'm most proud of is the work that I've done mentoring students, especially when it comes to diversity in sciences. So I look pretty white, but I'm actually Latina. And I had a pretty fraught relationship with science when I was growing up. And it wasn't even so much of a conscious thought that I couldn't do science. It was just, I didn't have any role models who were scientists. In my mind, scientists were white men in lab coats. That's what a scientist was to me. And so it wasn't until much later in my life that I came to realize that not only do I like science, but I'm actually good at it. I mean, I went through all of my you know, high school thinking I couldn't do science. I actually have this one memory of my chemistry professor who told us on the first day of class, I used to hate science, but now look at me. And I remember thinking, well, that will never
be me.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I will never like science.
Well, you said it earlier, you didn't even get into it till your 20s.
Exactly. And so since then, since I have decided that I love science, I have spent a lot of my time mentoring, especially people from backgrounds that aren't your traditional white academic backgrounds, about how to break into science. What does being a scientist mean? Giving them different perspectives of what science can look like and what a scientist can look like, and working with them on, especially when it comes to academics. If you aren't born into academics, it can look like a really tangled web that makes zero sense. And I know that from personal experience. So helping people navigate the academic system, especially, you know, I mentioned earlier that I won't knock junior colleges because I mentor students at JCs to help them get to four-year institutions and then watch them go on to graduate school and jobs in the sciences. And one of the number one things that I hear from the students that I work with, the students that I mentor, is, oh, you're a scientist. I love science, but I could never do it because I'm not good at math. And the number of girls and women who say this to me is astounding. It's like this common refrain that all women in the sciences, or I guess women outside of the sciences have. And trying to change that way of thinking and that way of talking and thinking about who is versus who isn't good at math, and what does it mean to do math, and what does it mean to be good at math and science, is one of the things that I've been really committed to.
Well, mentoring is one of the greatest gifts you can do, and I believe in it. I think it's wonderful. There's people that I have worked with that I still talk to, people from years back that we communicate, we share. They ask questions, we give guidance, we do different stuff. It's a great thing to do. You know, it's so important. So kudos to you. Don't stop, right? Don't stop giving back. I think that if you want to be fed, right, emotionally, spiritually, you got to give, right? You got to give to get. And mentoring is a way of being fed back, and you don't even realize it's coming, right? Mentoring is about being a friend. Mentoring is about being in that space of being able to share who you are and what you are. Not, you know, your whole job is not to just change somebody's trajectory. They change yours as well. So kudos to you. Don't stop doing that. That's really important. I appreciate that very much. All right, let's have some fun. You ready? You want to play a little trivia with me?
Ooh, all right.
You don't know this is coming. So you ready? I know. Well, let's see what we can come up with. You ready? Let's see if I can get you on the spot here. Pizza or calzone? Which is your go-to?
Pizza.
Correct answer. Favorite Harry Potter character? Ooh.
You know, I like Hermione because she's a smart woman, but I also like Hagrid because he's an adorable.
He's just cool. He's just cool. Yeah, he's just cool. He's like your cool uncle that comes over on a Saturday, right? He's great for the first hour, and then you want him to get the hell out of there. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I love it. Okay, which animal do you think adds more joy to the world? A cat or a dog?
Ooh.
There's really only one answer here. I'm just letting you know.
I guess if you're going just by joy to the world.
Joy to the world.
Probably dogs, just because, and I'm thinking about this in context of my kids, because my kids love animals so much. They love cats, they love dogs, they're not picky. But when they go to pet a dog, that dog will actually let them pet. And just this weekend, we were on a hike and we met this woman walking her puppy, who she was like, I'm trying to train my puppy not to jump. I'm so sorry if he jumps on your kids. And of course, my son undid all of the training, because as soon as the dog jumped on him, he was like, yay!
Full of joy.
And then he started jumping back. And I was like, we're trying to train my son too. Give me the name of your trainer.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. All right, now that you're a mom, you're a young mom, got some young kids. So let's just know right now, can you sing the Spongebob Squarepants theme song?
I cannot.
Okay.
We read SpongeBob SquarePants books. That's how nerdy my family is.
That's not nerdy. That's perfectly fine. Hey, look, I could do the Barney theme song with my kids. I mean, my kids came up with the Barney. I could still do the Barney song. I'm not going to do it for you, but I can do the Barney song.
I do know the saying from SpongeBob SquarePants, home sweet pineapple, because my kids found that hilarious when we read a SpongeBob SquarePants book, and now say it every time we get home.
I love it. I love it. What's the fastest you've ever driven in a car? Don't lie. Your mom's not listening. Well, she might, but she's not right now. So you can just tell me. Nobody's going to hear. Just tell me.
I'm going to say that unfortunately, my cars have always been kind of beaters, and they'll go like 75 miles if you drop them off a cliff and they're in free fall. Like that's their, including the cars I own today. They're just so old. But someday I hope to own an electric vehicle.
Nice.
That has a little bit more pep.
Hey, those electric cars are doing like 200 miles an hour
that
right now.
Have oars built in. I'm like, okay, kids, get out the oars. We're going up a hill.
The new Tesla is 0 to 60 in like 1.9 seconds.
Yeah.
1,000 to 1,000. That's 1.9 seconds.
Yeah, maybe I'll keep my car around so that my kids can drive it when they get old enough to drive, because I don't want them driving anything with power.
No, I don't. I totally agree with you. I've done a bunch of these, and I love doing these. And this one I love tremendously because of you and the center and how much it means to me and how much you mean to me and the work that you've done and the way people don't know the history of this organization like we do. And you've just made such an impact on this planet. You made such an impact on this world. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I know that people are listening out here. I hope that they recognize the good work that you're doing and what the center is doing and how important that it is. And I hope that they take time to figure out how they can help the center, whether they contribute financially or whether they get the newsletter or they make a difference in their own lives based on what the science is telling them to do. That's good enough too, right? So I just wanted to tell you, thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I have one final question I want to give to you. If you could just say one thing about the Organic Center to people, what would it be?
I would say incredible science, credibly sourced.
Nice. That needs to go on a damn t-shirt.
Yeah, I didn't make that up.
Nobody's going to know. You could have lied. Who's going to back it up?
I'm a scientist. My poignant, punchy lines are usually like a paragraph long. And then our communications team is like, no.
with footnotes.
Yeah, exactly. With like
with footnotes.
Exactly.
Well, I can't thank you enough. You're a joy. You're making this world a better place.
And I will reiterate, we could not have done this without you. So anytime Todd is bragging about all the cool things the Organic Center is doing, he's also bragging about himself.
Oh, well, I don't know about that. I just got the good fortune of hanging out with you guys a little bit and being in the room for some cool conversations and, making some good decisions. And I'm appreciative of that opportunity. Believe me, I really am. Folks, in your cars, let go of the steering wheel, start clapping. Everybody in your office, start doing your thing. Stand up for a moment, take a breath of fresh air, and thank this young lady for what she's doing, because she's making a difference in this planet in your life. Folks, give it up for Dr. Jessica Shade.
Thanks,
thank you.
Todd.
Much love to you.
It was so fun talking with you, as always.
Thanks. See you, everybody. Super huge shout out to Jessica and the work they're doing at the Organic Center. Do me a favor, do yourself a favor, do everybody that's going to show up here tomorrow on this planet a favor, and take a look at what they're doing and see how you can help. Be a part of the solution. Again, it doesn't have to be money. It could just be the fact that you're using their information to better your customer base, maybe bettering your Sunday night dinner with your family, and maybe use some of that information to teach your kids about the importance of science and what it means and how it's going to make a difference. So I appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us. Don't forget, rate, review, subscribe to us. That's how we're going to move this conversation forward. We need your support. Check us out on Instagram at TLC Todd-versations. The audio version of this is on all the podcast sites. YouTube is where the video lives. Really a fun way to look at stuff. We appreciate you. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your energy. Thank you for stopping by and listening. Take care of each other. And thank you so much. Again, I really do appreciate it. All the kind compliments and words and all the people that are joining us. We really do hope this platform is inspiring because, as I say all the time, inspiring people is very, very important. It's something you can do every day, and it's something you should do every day. So thanks a lot. Go inspire, folks. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.